मैं खुद बोल लेता हूँ इस बार। मैं अभी भी इस किताब को समझ रहा हूँ, क्योंकि मुझे लगता है कि 10 से 15 सालों से मेरा हिंदी से नाता थोड़ा टूट गया है और मैं वापस से हिंदी अब पढ़ रहा हूँ, इंजॉय कर रहा हूँ। तो मैं थोड़ा अभी भी ग्रास्प कर रहा हूँ इसको। तो बहुत सारी बातें जो मैं अभी बोलने वाला हूँ, ये हो सकता है कि इसमें 1-2 पॉइंट इंटरनल क्रिटिक है, लेकिन बहुत सारे एक्सटर्नल क्रिटिक्स भी हैं, और बाकी लोगों ने जो बातें कही हैं उसी पर मैं जोड़ते हुए अपनी बात रख रहा हूँ। ठीक है। For long, the logic of Indian social science theorizing has adhered to a phrase that Dipesh Chakravarti had first coined in provincializing Europe, and this was that Western thought is simultaneously indispensable yet inadequate for thinking through various life practices of non-European societies. Indispensable yet inadequate. In a recently published paper on Marxism, Kaviraj makes an interesting move by contending this formulation. So he changes this formulation, although he had agreed to this in his book on civil society, if you remember, wherein suggests that there is now a need to think and tease out regularities in non-European histories itself and construct theory or undertake analytical operations of a higher order whose reference is not European thought. To my mind, Manindra sir's book is an attempt and intervention in the same direction, wherein his plea is to generate theory, concepts, explanations which are not colored by European thinking. But his plea for indigeneity, as he explained, is not a plea for authenticity. And this is a difference that we need to make. He again and again says in his book. Now, this is how the book is situated. This is how I read the book. So I read the book in front of the text. This is how I read the book. So this is not, I don't think this is the authorial intended meaning or anything. So this is how I read the book. I think it is in this plea that this plea needs to be further fleshed out. So, for example, colonialism in some sense is the Purva Paksh against which Professor Thakur poses himself. And here I'll just complicate what he's saying, and I think in this way, as I've told him, that there are themes that needs further explication. I mean, that's why I said ki somehow it feels like there is a second attendant volume that will come out after this. Because there are many themes that the book touches, and I think I mean it opens up, and I think it needs further explication, and maybe he'll do that. So colonialism is that Purva Paksh, but colonialism, as several thinkers have pointed out, impacts different societies in different ways. So in some cases, colonial encounter can mean that indigenous population recedes into a cocoon. Here, the task would be to map knowledge traditions or systems which had remained impervious to changes that colonial modernity brought out. But can a similar thing be said about India? Has colonialism not broken our connection with the past in ways which it is just next to impossible to recover them? I mean, that is one question that needs to be thought about. Now, here to my mind, there are two kinds of argument that gets mixed in Professor Thakur's plea for an Indian social science. The first is recovering what has been lost due to colonialism. This essentially means studying ancient Indian philosophy and applying those concepts today. That is one sort of argument that he does in the book. But I think there is an argument that also goes at a second level. And this is like this. It can also mean, this going back can also mean thinking about a tradition of modern Indian thinking, which starts with Ram Mohan Roy and goes down to Gandhi, Ambedkar, Iqbal and Nehru, who at one level are using language of theory construction which is completely Western, but then thinking about issues and coming up with constructions which are unique to India. So take for example Ambedkar, who uses the language of liberalism but yet thinks about a structure of inequality and its remedies which are completely sui generis to India, which are unique to India. This is a body of thought which is completely different from Western thought, but not in the sense that the first proposition is Indian, not in that sense. So Indian can mean two different things. One, using resources from ancient Indian past. Two, using resources from modern Indian past. Now these two arguments need to be analytically differentiated because these two demands different things and has different challenges attached to it. So for example, the second one, I can be very controversial with the modern Indian thought, but I can't be with ancient Indian thought, precisely because I don't have so much capacity of Sanskrit and Persian. And even if I learn Sanskrit, would I be able to read Abhinav Gupta? Would I be able to read other texts? Panini? That is a question that needs to be thought about. In a similar way, that if you go to Max Muller Bhavan or a Goethe Institute and you learn German, can you read Philosophy of Right by Hegel in German? So this is a challenge that needs to be thought about. I think Professor Kaviraj has also pointed out this in several discussions that we were also having, I think, JNU Academic. But I think this needs to be thought about as to how we do that. Now, the second is, and this is an external critique, that the book constantly talks about the Indian tradition and goes back to text. And this is, I think, in line with what Professor Pradhan and Prachi has said, that constantly talks about texts of ancient India. But I feel there is a conspicuous absence of, and this is something I've told Professor Thakur as well, that it does not talk about experience and histories of southern India. So on which a lot of work has been done. So say scholars like K. Nilakantha Shastri, David Shulman, Sajjay Subramaniam, these are people who have worked on southern India, ancient Indian past of southern India. I think that can be included. Also, I think there is a lack. I think since the book is sort of targeting two audiences at the same time, one a larger intervention on the Indian social science thinking के रियाल में और दूसरा एक generic audience के रियाल में, I think because of that constraint he is not able to include, or I don't know, but there is if there is, this debate needs to be extended. I think there needs to include in the modern Indian tradition works that have been done on the conceptualization of concepts, historical concepts such as Samaj, Desh, Unnati, Rajneeti. I mean, these are concepts on which work has been done, say by Professor Manindra Singh, Sudipto Kaviraj and others. So I think that needs to be included. And in this sense, I would say that Bhargava's political secularism or Chatterjee's political society should also be considered as products of Indian thinking. In this sense. Okay, towards the last point about the inward gaze, I think the point that Chetna made, I think while there is much talk about civilizational ethos in the book, civilizational shadows are given a minimal space. I mean, which is understandable, but since your binna and normative pura push hai book ke piche, lekin I think that needs to be included. I mean, if for social science theorizing, I think something like say authority या kinship पर मैं आप जिस तरह से सोचता हूँ, अगर ancient India में क्या theorization था authority या kinship को लेकर, वो अगर आज inform कर रहा है Indian voter कैसे vote कर रहा है, तो I think that needs to be culled out. And this is a related question to the debate on philosophy versus practice, and my own thinking about Indian philosophy. So while Ambedkar was wrong about questioning the pluralist nature of Indian philosophy, that he thought that Indian philosophy is just like this, and he was wrong in that. But he was not wrong, he was completely right when he was thinking about the practice of that political thought, that body of philosophical thinking, that it was that it led to a homogeneous dominating nature of political practice, and that needs to be excavated. Lastly, I mean, any discussion on human nature, I think this is a debate that also I think have taken place in CPS Young Scholars conferences when somebody presented on, I think, Marx's concept of human nature or something like that, and I remember that some of us had a long debate that whether post Althusser something like this can be done. Like, we need to really think about that. That can we, because Althusser sort of destabilizes or demolishes the whole argument about essentially thinking about human nature. So if we need to think about human nature, we need to engage with that thinking. We need to make our way through that. So that was my view. Varun?